Hey, welcome back to the Flow Show. I'm Joanna Turner, Intuitive Business Mentor, and today we have an incredible episode for you. In fact, since we've recorded it, I had quite a vulnerability hangover because my amazing friend Ryan Yokome is just his way of I was interviewing him and he was asking me some personal questions too. So it went a little bit deeper than I was expecting to, but that's okay. I went back with some intentions of cutting it out and just left it because I guess it's supposed to be out there. Anyway, I hope you enjoy it. Let me tell you a little bit about Ryan. Over the past decade, Ryan has helped thousands of entrepreneurs get out of their own way to unleash their greatest purpose. He is a husband, father, entrepreneur, business coach, endurance athlete, nature lover, and host of the Soul Wealth podcast. And that is exactly what this conversation was about, soul wealth. And we got into some stories about we're on very similar timelines and our experiences. We talked about masculine feminine dynamics, faith, various places Ryan's been in the world, some of the challenges he's gone through. And it's a really beautiful conversation. He's one of those people I could literally talk to for, well, we did talk for hours. It's the longest episode yet. And I think we could talk for days and days. So he's just a really awesome person. And we had quite a laugh as well. We were actually just cracking ourselves up, which is amazing. So I hope you enjoy it as well. And there are just a few moments in this podcast, in the recording, where we've sort of almost talked over each other. And there was actually, and we mentioned it in the recording, but there was a couple of second time lag in the. I used something called Riverside to do my recording, and there's just a couple of second time lag. So there's a few moments where we go to talk over each other. But yeah, that was down to the time lag, so it was just a little bit awkward there, and a little bit Ryan's what do you call it? Audio was great. Mine is a little bit patchy in times. I've been having some issues with my microphone when I have it plugged in. For whatever reason, I cannot hear the other person on the other side. I've fiddled around with all these different settings and contacted them. So I did it without having my microphone there, and it does just go in and out a little bit. So I'm working on it and working with them to try and get it sorted. So I hope you have a little bit of patience with that. Otherwise, it was a brilliant conversation, really funny. We enjoyed ourselves, and I hope you do as well. So enjoy the podcast, and I'll see you on the other side. The Flow Show. I am so excited to be here with my amazing friend Ryan Yokome. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks, Joanna.
We've just been having a little chat before we got started, and we met each other back in 2016, which seems like forever ago, and at an event in LA. And since then, I've just followed you online and enjoyed watching your massive success story, and it's just been very inspiring. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
It's cool because we were just talking about when we first met, like you said, in person, and it's been several years since I've talked to you, and I could just jump on a call with you and it's natural. It's a flow. It's easy to catch up with you. So I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Well, considering we've both been down similar rabbit holes over the last few years, it could go anywhere. So
yeah.
I'm a little bit like, ooh, where is this going to take us? So nobody knows. And I love that we both do. I've been listening. I was just telling you as well before, I've been listening to all your podcasts for the last 24 hours. I've walked the dog listening to you. I've worked out listening to you all day, cooked, made a huge pot of soup, all listening in Ryan World. And it's been amazing. I've learned a few things as well that even I hadn't I was like, whoa, that was new. So I'm really looking forward to this, and we'll see what happens and where we go with this. So actually, let's dive in with grid work. So one of the beautiful things you talk about is your journey visiting some of the energy centers. And with this podcast, we have most of the people, everyone that's been on so far, has had a connection with visiting different energy centers, feeling drawn to different places, and taking their energy with them and having these beautiful experiences. So I would just love to dive in and just tell us a bit about some of the amazing energy centers you've been to. Mount Shasta is the top one that I would love to hear a bit more about. It's the one I haven't been to. So can you tell us a little bit about what drew you to there and your experience up in Mount Shasta?
Yeah, there's some interesting stuff that happens in Mount Shasta. It's a fascinating place to be. I spent, I think it was close to a week there in the dead of winter. So it was January 2019. And it was very cool. The town itself is tiny. You could drive the whole city in about a minute, maybe 2 minutes. But it is like when I went to Sedona, it's kind of like a little bubble that almost feels like you're outside of the United States just because the frequency of the area is so freaking high.
Wow.
And I went in with the intention, I wanted to experience something supernatural. So I went in knowing that, and I did experience some really weird stuff that affirmed to me that there are so many magical, amazing things happening in our world. But what drew me there is, I don't know, do you know your life path number?
I don't. I know yours is a 5, but I don't know what mine is.
I feel honored that you know mine. Yes.
Y'all say. I know everything,
So
Ryan.
your audience, they could go search life path calculator number and you'll see it. You just type in your date of birth.
Sure.
So I'm a 5. So where I get lit up is when I'm having adventure and I'm traveling and I'm experiencing new things. Like I shouldn't be living a mundane, boring, routine life every day where I'm doing the same thing. It's not what I meant to do. So I like going to these spiritual hotspots because they're very activating for me and my DNA and just my soul. I feel totally alive. So that was one of the reasons, is just going to these places like Mount Shasta, Sedona, going through Joshua Tree and Palm Springs. That was wildly incredible. And even before we woke up, we were traveling to places like the Bahamas and a few other places across Canada, US, that were very activating, but I wasn't aware of that at the time. It's kind of weird. Like when you reflect back, you're like, oh, that's why I went to that place, but I didn't consciously know it at the time. Yeah. And that, and then my human design is a projector. So I'm pretty lazy.
Me too.
Yeah. When I was my dad, so my last name's Japanese, my dad's Japanese, and my dad has an insane work ethic. He's very disciplined, very, like, to him, the Asian side of my family is credentials, schooling. He went to school for, university for 8 years. He's a structural engineer. Wow. And there's me, I'm like a teenager, and I was reading a book called The Lazy Person's Guide to Success, which is like, how do I become successful and not have to work? Basically.
Exactly. I'm like the 4-hour work week. I'm like, let me just check this.
So, and then when I discovered I was a projector, I realized, projectors should only really be working 3 hours a day, and, allowing people to come to them from creating content. I was talking to my sister. She's a very successful realtor, and she's a generator, and she's not into like the deep woo stuff, but she's open to listening to it.
Yeah.
And she just goes. I mean, she can go all day and just crank, where I get burnt out. And I told her how I create as a projector, and she goes, oh, that's reverse prospecting. And I thought, I didn't know you had a name about it, of that. And
I like that.
Yeah, the real estate industry, it's called reverse prospecting. And so it's basically what I do. So I'm a projector. My wife, Chris, is a projector, and our daughter, Noah, who's 3.5, is a projector.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's
So that
amazing.
kind of came, yeah, that kind of came the foundation of how I enjoy growing businesses, where I have the free time to go do things like this that are, out there, and then take what I learn and bring it back and share what I learn to people.
I mean, as a projector, we've had one episode about human design already, and so if anyone's wondering what they are and they've not heard about it, definitely go check out Ebony's episode. And she has a link in the show notes on where you can put in your details and actually find out what your human design is. So you can check that out. But what are your numbers? Do you know you're like, I'm a 6'2". Do you know what I
I
mean?
looked them up. I don't remember. I have the chart, but I don't
Yeah,
remember. And so many people ask me that. But yeah, do
I'm
you
just
you know what your
curious.
design is? You would know.
Well, I'm a projector and then I'm a 6'2", so it's a hermit leader. And so I'm supposed to be leading, but I also enjoy hermiting and hiding. But I think it's a lot to like protect my energy. So I have these moments of being quite outgoing and sort of that extroverted introvert, I suppose. So I need my alone time to recharge and also um, can spend, I'm happy on stage and doing things like that. So it's a kind of it's quite a mixture, I suppose, of being in and out. But the projectors, as far as I can tell from all my listening and my learning, we are really starting to come online, and we are going to be very much uh, needed. So there's a big shift coming in 2027. So our energy and guidance for people is really needed in that obviously over the next few years as people are awakening, but very much so from 2027 onwards. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think part of
that's
why
interesting.
yeah, go on.
I think I am a six. I think I am a 6'2", like you. I could be wrong, but
Mm,
when you're
interesting.
describing that, it sounds exactly how I live. I love being on stage in front of an audience. Like, I've spoken in front of 10,000 people in Atlanta and smaller events with 1,000 people in Palm Springs, and it lights me up. But once I'm done speaking, as an example, when I spoke in Palm Springs, there's 1,000 people there. And then when I came off stage, walking through the hotel, everyone was stopping because they had questions for me.
Yeah,
And then I'm like, this is too much. So then I need to go back to my hotel room and be alone and
yeah,
just process it. Yeah, but I
absolutely.
like being, same as you. I love being on stage, but just for moments. Like, I couldn't do it for, consistently all day, all night kind of thing.
Yeah, and I traveled way too
I need
much.
to hermit.
Sometimes I look at the likes of Joe Dispenza and those guys who I love, but his travel schedule is hectic. Like hectic. Like
Is
the
it?
number of his like week-long retreats that he does all over the world every year, they're booked, a year in advance, probably more. And I just look at that and I'm like, I could not keep that schedule up. That's as wild to me now. Like I tried to for a few years, but I just burnt out. So that's so
Well,
interesting.
I had to do a lot of changing in my beliefs because the way I was raised was not of a projector lifestyle. So it was, the typical society's beliefs, like you work Monday to Friday, 8 hours a day, and that's what you do. So I had a lot of guilt when I would slow down and take time off. But the
Mhm.
paradox of that, and this is what I've noticed, as long as I'm doing things like this and I'm creating content and giving value to the world, when I go take time to have a nap, or I just go for a bike ride, or I enjoy my life, I get messages from people that are interested in working with me rather than me just pushing through it all the time. So I
Right.
found huge value. It's like I had to change that. Relaxing and enjoying my life is valuable, and it's not a waste of time.
That is such a massive shift. Because again, I come from a similar background. I find out my parents are both manifesting generators, but so they'll have a ton of things on the go. Um, and my dad's 87 and he's still not stopping. He's up a ladder, putting curtains up and painting the house. And um, I'm like, you're 87, just stop. It's okay. But he wants to
So
feel
my
useful,
dad's like,
purpose. Whereas if you tried to retire me tomorrow, I'd probably be like, okay. But no, I'd still have something to say and something I want to give to the world, but I wouldn't have as much of a hard time with it. I don't think if somebody's offering me help when I'm
well,
87, I hope I'll take it.
yeah, yeah. My dad's similar. He's not 87, but he's in his 70s. But when I went to Mount Shasta, and you probably get this, one of the things I thoroughly enjoy is just relaxing to the point where you can pick up the subtle energy. You kind of go from this busy living your life, you got to pay bills, you got to do the thing, to totally relaxing where you can feel other people's energy, you can feel the energy of a tree, you can feel if I really get deep into it, you can collectively feel what's happening with society and the world, and where kind of the world state is at, and maybe possibly the direction that it could be heading. And Shasta was really cool because, like I said, we were there in the winter and we rented a cabin on the lake. So it was very quiet and there's only a couple people in this little complex. And I think we saw Bigfoot's footprints, but that could be another story for another time.
Okay.
We saw some orbs in the snow, and there's a lot of people that believe that it's either the root chakra or the crown chakra of the earth. And there's a lot of helicopters and lights that have been seen at night at the top of the mountain, and a lot of supernatural things, and there could even be tunnels and stuff. But when I can slow down enough into, it's almost like the sensitivity of the emotions I'm experiencing, I just feel very connected to what I'm doing.
Absolutely.
But that takes a getting back into the body.
I think it's so counterintuitive, but I feel like going forward, it's the secret to everything. It's the slowing down to speed up. And I think we just don't want to. Oh, it's so hard to admit or acknowledge that's what's happening.
Well, I think since 2020, there's a lot of people that have unprocessed emotions. We were talking about what happens with the body if it's unprocessed, how it can create disease or stress or whatever. Everyone went through the ringer for a couple of years, 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And now you have, stuff happening in the Middle East and, with United States, and just, we have an election year in the States too, which maybe potentially won't even happen. So there's a lot of people, I think, that are going through ascension fatigue and transition of their purpose as well.
Yeah. Can you speak into a little bit about what ascension fatigue is?
You kind of don't feel like doing anything. It's like, have you ever had that?
I've had years of burnout and not wanting to do much. Well, I'd like to call it ascension fatigue.
It's transition. Well, we all go through these weird transitions of purpose. I mean, I've gone through that, and to be honest, I'm going through it right now. I had for 8 years. So I started my coaching business in 2014, and up until 2020, it had continued to grow year after year. Like, it was easily on track to do $1 million per year, like million cash in per year. And then 2021 was the first year we made less than the previous year.
Right.
And what I noticed with myself is I started noticing, like, things I was doing weren't working anymore in business. And there were certain things that, like, didn't light me up. I could feel it in my heart. It wasn't the same as it used to be. And it was becoming certain things like hard. I just remember feeling like unfulfilled and doing certain things in the business.
Yeah.
And then you kind of go through, and I'm coming out of it now, but it took, like, no joke, it took like 2 to 3 years to go through this void where I just didn't know the next step to take. And I think a part of that was ascension fatigue. Like, I got really vocal over everything that was happening.
Yeah.
And then after, I was like, I'm freaking tired. Like, I just need to rest.
Yeah.
But I do feel that we're coming out of that. And I've heard that, I don't know if you have heard this too, I heard this year will be a bit of emotionally charged year for things that are happening around the world. But the next year, it starts to ramp up and get better. Is that kind of what you had heard too?
Yeah, that's what I've spoken a little bit about that on the podcast, about this year being a year of awakening. And if people aren't sort of coming online, and if the more they're resisting it, that they have the potential maybe to have a harder year. But there's also a lot of opportunity. I'm excited again. I feel this, like, a new current of energy that I want to follow. But I think there's going to be a lot going on. And like you said, I did a very similar thing. I was, I might call it activist fatigue. But the amount of information I was consuming and trying to sort of spread the word and, help people sometimes has a projector, feeling like I was shouting into the void and nobody was listening. And I was exhausted by that. And I think as well that collective energy was so heavy as well. And I was obviously consuming a lot of stuff while I was fascinated by it. It's a lot of heavy stuff to process as well.
It is. Yes.
Wait, what? Um, and I think I definitely got pulled down into it. And
Yeah.
I feel like I'm sort of, it's almost like I'm emerging out of the mud of that, and I'm having to be really what's the word, conscious about what I'm consuming and turning off. I've never watched horror stuff, but even just the violence and all the stuff that's happening, I'm aware of it, but I'm trying not to consume every last bit of information about it at the moment, and really focus on what am I here for? How can I contribute? That kind of stuff. So hence the start of the podcast, finally.
What's interesting about that? Because I did the same thing, and now I don't spend as much time, looking into things for awakening research and stuff. But if I do, I just dip into it and I can pop out of it, not get sucked into this dark hole.
Right.
But I love how you call them God winks. I call them God moments.
Yeah.
Because to me, when that happens, I'm out of like, how do I put this? I'm in a higher frequency.
Yes.
And it's alignment, and there's synchronicity, and you've gone beyond the matrix or gone beyond the conditioning, and it's very cool. It's a natural flow. I mean, I don't have it happen. Sometimes I don't have it happen every day. I mean, I guess you could.
Yeah.
But it seems to be more moments.
Yeah.
Very, very cool moments. I was actually thinking of them, and I'm like, it's the way I live. And when I thought about your podcast, I was thinking about it yesterday and today, and I'm like, what are some of the moments I've had related to these God winks? And I could think of a ton. So if you want to talk about them, we can.
Oh yeah, I would love to. Yeah, absolutely. I would still love to go back. Actually, just before we go into that, I would love to ask you a little bit. And so we talked a little bit about Shasta. Obviously, you spent time in Sedona, which is a wonderful, wonderful place. The one I haven't been to as well, although I did live in Bermuda, I've never been to the Bahamas. And I hadn't actually, I've been looking more into it because it's kind of the home of, or closer to where the Atlantis was and that kind of thing. I'm really just curious what you experienced there and what you picked up in the Bahamas, because again, it's not one of the centers I've specifically been to.
Well, what's interesting is we stayed at the resort called Atlantis.
Of course.
Yeah.
And even just their fact there isn't a resort there called that, right? How crazy.
Yes. It was cool. Like, it's a very interesting place. Well, one of the things that happened there, do you know a woman, she taught shadow work? She's passed now. Her name is Debbie Ford. You must know her.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she wrote the book called Dark Side of the Light Chasers.
Yes.
Have you read that book?
Yes.
Okay. So that book was the one that got me to start my coaching business. So we went down there because we were a part of a network marketing company, and we earned a trip for free. So we flew down to Miami. There's a big convention there, 20,000 people. And then we took another plane to hop over to the Bahamas. And we were in the hotel, and we were going down to the gym, and standing in front of us was this woman with her son. And I could tell she was like sick because she was very thin, but her aura was huge. Like she was just giving off insane energy. I'm like, who is this woman? And Chris, my wife, she leans over to me and she whispers in my ear and she says, "That's Debbie Ford." I didn't know who she was at the time, but Chris had read her book already.
Yeah.
And I just felt her energy. I'm like, something special about this woman. So she paid, and I guess got her son at the time was a teenager, paid for him to work out, and then we went in there and paid so we could work out. So fast forward, we left the Bahamas, and then fast forward, it was I think about 4 or 6 months later, she passed away from cancer.
Oh, wow.
And Chris had, we were living in an apartment at the time. Chris had her book, The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, sitting on the dining room table. And after, it was just a few days after Debbie passed away, I would walk by that book and it would talk to me and it would say, read me. And the first time I walked by, I'm like, I'm not reading it. I'm not interested in reading this book. I walked by it again the next day. It said, read me. Again, I swear, like, you know how they say you need to market to people 8 to 12 times?
Mm-hmm.
I needed this book to say to me 8 times, read me, before I paid attention to it. So
I have a vision of, you know, those the cartoon brooms that like stand up and like animate themselves. Do you know what I'm
yes.
talking? Is that Cinderella or
Yeah,
something?
like in the Fantasia movies.
Yes, that's exactly it. I feel like this book needs to like stand up on legs and come and slap you in the face. Be like, read me.
Basically what it was. And yeah, I picked it up and I read it, and it was the first time I'd ever experienced anything so profound around this concept of shadow work. And I started doing work myself, and it totally blew open who I was as a person. There is basically, I'd never looked at my shadow on anything. And so it was, the first few months were very hard. Like when you really start looking at some of the parts of yourself that you don't want to be, or you don't like, or your past.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that freed me up. And then, yeah, from there, we ended up moving down to San Diego, moved out of the apartment. We moved down to San Diego for 4 months, and we lived down there. And that's when I launched my coaching business. And the shadow work became the starting point of where I worked with people, was teaching them the same thing.
Wow. Do you know, I think either you maybe interviewed me for a summit or something, and I'm sure we talked about this before.
Yeah.
And either I read it because you mentioned it, or I went back. I feel like I'll reread it again. And I'll link it in the show notes for everybody, because it was so profound. And there's the one moment that I've used as a metaphor so many times since reading that book is the idea of holding the beach ball under the water.
Yes, I remember talking to you about that.
I think maybe we did, and how, you know, if you've ever been in a swimming pool, you try and hold the beach ball under the water. You can do it for a while, but it will come and smack you in the face at some point. And I've used that many times to sort of describe unhealed trauma to people. And, you know, either we can decide to let the air out of the beach ball ourselves and do the shadow work and look at this stuff, or it will come and smack us in the face at some point in the future, maybe at a point where it's less convenient, you know? So,
yeah,
you
so
know?
I think when going to the Bahamas, that was a profound moment where I see these certain places on the earth as high frequency energy spots where they're very activating. And I personally think that this is way out there, but I believe time is an illusion. If you're in the 3D, it's definitely real and you need it, right? Like,
yeah,
I couldn't be like, hey, let's do this podcast whenever we align. Like, like we need a time. So, but when you move into the higher frequencies, I don't believe there is time in that God moment, which is divine time. So you have Chronos, which is clock and calendar, and then you have divine time. And these pockets of places that are so high frequency, I think they transcend time. And they also, I believe, activate DNA or strands of DNA that maybe were dormant or inactive, and possibly somebody tampered with them to make them dormant.
Right.
So when we go there, it's so, at least for me, it's so activating that synchronicities happen very organically. I'm not searching for them or trying to make them happen. They just happen. And then that's when I know I'm in a higher frequency. And experience the same thing. We've been to Maui, Hawaii a bunch of times. That place is like, it's like a feminine explosion. That place has so much connection. It's amazing.
That's I've only been to Hawaii once, briefly. So maybe I wasn't there long enough to fully experience that. But yeah, and I was just thinking there for a second about how cool it is that you were like literally gifted a free trip to the Bahamas. Like it was like, come
Yeah.
here, like it's spirit or whatever is wanted your energy so badly to be there. You were literally gifted a trip to go to Atlantis. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
how wild is that?
Well, this house, I've never told anyone this. So the house we're renting right now, we just moved into. Like I said, we're renting this house because the house we were in before, Chris's parents were living with us, and they help watch Noah. Which, oh my god, childcare is a must when you run your own business from home. It's really hard to get work done with a toddler.
Seriously.
So we're blessed where they are able to watch her, but we didn't have a separate basement suite for them. So we're in this house now for at least the next year. So they have their own suite.
Yeah.
And it was so crazy how it happened, Joanna. Chris was on Facebook Marketplace, and she saw this house pop up. Like, wasn't even searching for it. It just popped up in the news feed. And she reached out to the owner, and she said, "Hey, can we take a look?" So we drove out the next day. I think it was next day. And we looked at this house. And right away, I knew, like, we need to move into this house. So the owner it's a husband and wife, like around our age. Great, great people. Like the housing market in Vancouver has gone nuts. Like the average house is around $1 million. So this house we're in sells for 1.6 million because it's like a brand new. It's not even that big. Like it's like 3,300 square feet. It's just the cost of the housing market.
Right.
So we left the house, and before we left the house after viewing this one, the owner, she said, "If you guys want a second viewing, just let me know."
Yeah.
And so I had a feeling like she was game for us to rent it.
Yeah.
And because the market here is so hot, I don't know what it's like where you live, but rental properties get scooped up right away.
Oh,
there's usually,
yeah.
Is it the same?
Well, I don't know about right in where I am at the moment in Scotland, but when I was in Australia, it was like, especially after COVID, it was dog eat dog, like 20, 30 people per viewing. And then they've actually got a big problem with locals in that area, a part of Australia, because people in the pandemic were like just taking properties, offering way over, even buying them unseen, renting them unseen, all this kind of stuff. So just really, it becomes really an intense kind of fight, and you really do have to like work your spiritual magic to get the right place at the right time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been like that here. And some places, my sister just got a place, and some of the places were 30 to 40 people in a lineup to go see the open house for a rental property. And just the scrutiny of the income statements, and some people want bank statements, and it's just like a whole rigmarole to get a place as a tenant. So we came here, we left, and I said to Chris, Chris's mom came, but Chris's dad didn't come. So I said, we should really bring your dad back so he can see the place if he likes it.
Yeah.
But I said, we need to go now. Like we can't wait like a week.
Yeah.
Like when things happen, that line, you can't delay, right? Like you just need to do it. So we talked to her dad. Her dad said, yeah, we'll come take a look. So we went the next day, and we took a look, and we're standing outside after we walked through the house right here in the front. I was talking to the owners, and I said, so what's the next step? Like if we want to take this place, is it application? What's the next step? And she looked at me and she said, if you guys want it, it's yours. Like, that's it.
Yeah.
And so I said, okay. And so I couldn't talk to her dad at the time. I would have said yes on the spot, but I needed to talk to her dad first to find out. So we went home, and I said, what do you think? And he's like, yeah, it's good, and we can make it work. And he had some reservations, but I said, listen, we need to do this, like 100%. So we messaged her that same day, and we said, we'll take it. And she's like, great, that's it, we're in. And we literally moved in a month after that, and that was it. Yeah, it was so easy. And to me, that's a God moment. And then keep in mind, through this whole process, of course, like my fears come up, and my control, and like all like the worst case scenarios would come up for me.
Yeah.
But I just kept trusting and leaning into it, and we moved in, and it's truly a God wink, as you call it, God moment.
I love that. Yeah, it's like what are the chances, right, of getting a place that easily, not having to go through all the hoops, makes your life a whole lot easier. And there's probably some beautiful divine reason that you're meant to be exactly in that spot, something
Well,
high.
I think it's because my parents live 5 minutes from here.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, so I personally think it's for me to do some work around my parents. And I was also born here. I'm living in Maple Ridge. I was living in Coquitlam before. It was about a 45-minute drive from here. Because I was born here, I think there's some work for me to do around my inner child and my relationship with my parents. And of course, I'm in communication more with my dad and my mom, and all the triggers come up. So it's like, let me just move here to work on myself.
I really understand that, Ryan, at the moment. Yeah. I came back to Scotland and it's been in my face. It's like,
Oh, are you
yeah.
serious?
Oh,
With your
absolutely. Yeah, I'm
with
staying
family?
with them at the moment. Yeah. So,
Oh,
it's
no
been,
way.
oh,
Oh my God.
yeah. I came back here during the pandemic because my dad was sick. He had open heart surgery coming up. So there was this when I was in Australia, I heard this voice telling me to get out now. And I hadn't considered leaving. I just set my house up. I had a gorgeous brand new place. I just finished furnishing, and I had to just let go of all my possessions and get on a plane and come home. So yeah, it was quite intense and quite a quick decision. And his operation, because of COVID and the hospitals and all the system, was delayed by 9 months, something like that, 9-10 months, and then he had his recovery. And so I was like, well, I can't leave until he's had his operation, and he's through the other side. And then my mum got broke ribs, and then so I'm like helping both of them, and then he
Mm.
needed another operation, and then my mum hurt herself again. And so I've been here sort of helping out and whatever, and it's been really intense. And all of my stuff, like,
Yeah,
I
no.
thought I had worked on and through everything, um and to get the point we're at now, we've come a long way. But it's been really in my
So
face. Um, yeah.
and you're like sharing a kitchen and the space, like you're in the same house, everything with them.
I have an apartment within the house. So I have like a living room, I have, a bedroom, bathroom, a little mini kitchen. So I have a whole apartment. But yeah, we do share other spaces. But yeah, so I can lock the door. The door is locked, and I have my own, full living room and apartment. So like it's quite good. I grew up in a bed and breakfast. Our house was like they rented rooms and stuff. So then my dad had them all converted a couple. So we
Okay.
have different
Yeah.
apartments, and they run Airbnb. And so actually now I run the Airbnb business, and we have another
No
property,
way.
stuff like that. So yeah, I've sort of taken over that for them as well. So yeah, I'm still here. But I know it's to do this
Yeah.
healing work. It's
Yeah, I
intense.
can really relate. Yeah, on both fronts. My own parents and then Chris's parents have been living with us for over a year now. So there's the in-law dynamics too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's cool. I work on acceptance a lot. Like if you ever look at the frequency and the hertz of emotions, guilt and shame, anger being some of the lower emotions, and then upwards of joy, enlightenment, and love. And acceptance to me is the gateway to moving back into love and synchronicity,
Mm. Mm.
because especially things I can't control. But yeah, it's an interesting when you can be with a parent or an in-law and get the trigger and then have the tools to move through the trigger instead of
Mhm.
blaming them or wanting them to change to make you happy. Yeah, it's cool you're
Absolutely.
aware of that.
Oh, it's the acceptance piece has been really interesting because I think when I was not at home, I mean, I was away for 25 years. So it's not, I was like, she lives with her parents. Like, I did live away for 25 years, guys, okay? But I have been back here for a while. But all of the time, a lot of the work I had been doing was wanting them to accept me, which they really struggle with, right? So my work was accepting myself. So I think I did quite well on that, right? pat on my back. But the dynamic that I've realized now I'm here that I never had really gotten into was accepting them for them. So if I want them to accept me as I am, which, would be nice, but I've got to accept, at the same time, I've got to accept them, and they are not going to change at their age, and they're not open to it. They don't want to. They're not interested in looking at their shadows and their inner child. Like, that's not a conversation you can have with people. You're like, do you realize that this is just your inner child still playing out at your age? I'm like, you're acting like a toddler. Come on, like this is not okay. But what I'm also noticing is, I think the older people get, especially in their mid-80s, is all of their unhealed trauma comes up. And so, while I don't think when I was younger they sort of necessarily behaved like this, it's all coming out now, and because they just can't suppress it anymore. And so I see a lot in my mum. It's her. She's not heard. So it's always about, she's not heard, she's not heard, she's not heard. And she was a middle child. So I'm like, aha. I think there's something going on here. But, that is, at this point, it's not going to be resolved, I don't think, without some sort of major intervention. But so it's interesting.
Yeah. I've noticed that.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I've noticed that with my parents too, as they've become older, is their habits and their beliefs are a little more ingrained than they used to be. But me as a dad now, I'd be on the other side of the spectrum. I'm going to go through the same thing with my daughter, and we plan on having a second kid. So it's really interesting. Like, I was shooting B-roll because I was going to upload a reel, and we were walking through a forest. It was just me and Noah, and I was doing a selfie style. I just needed some B-roll, right? And I was walking, and Noah was talking, and I was going, yeah, honey, And when I listened to the playback of the B-roll after, she was saying to me, "You don't listen to me, Dad. You don't listen to me." And she's 3.5.
Oh.
Yeah, so it was like, when you get to hear yourself on audio or on video, you really see who you are, And so I'm like, oh my God, I need to do such a better job at not being preoccupied doing something else when I'm with her, but being totally present with her, because that's creating her beliefs, especially her beliefs towards men, with me being her dad. Like, men don't listen to me. Does that become a belief? Like what your mom is saying, right? It's like, it's so wild. It's like, snap me back into being conscious and being like, okay, yeah, let me step it up as a dad for her, especially under the age of 10, because all their beliefs are being created.
Yeah. Wow. But you guys are, a million steps ahead, even with having the self-awareness around that stuff. Like, she'll be okay.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, we do our best to be conscious parents. I remember this other time I was recording with Chris. And like, when you do these interviews, maybe you're really good at it. It takes me a lot of effort, is to listen to what people were saying. Even when you had said that you have a separate apartment inside the home, I'm like, oh crap, did she already tell me that? And I just didn't hear it. Like, it's hard to listen and ask questions. Do you know what I mean? So I was doing something with Chris, and I watched the playback, and she was talking, and then she stopped talking, and I started talking. And what I realized is I wasn't listening to what she was saying when we were recording the video. And there's things that I should have picked up. And so I said to her after, I said, hey, do I not listen to you sometimes? Like, I'm not very good at hearing what you're saying. She says to me, sometimes I want to kill you because you don't listen. So, and you women are so intuitive. Like, when a man's listening to you or not.
Right.
And it's like it's a practice for me to acceptance, and then also truly listening to what the person is saying to me.
Oh, I mean, one, I'm wondering if that applies to me right now because I think there's a couple second time lag on here, and I feel like I've spoken over you a couple of times. But I think it's maybe a bit of time lag going on in the recording. And
Yeah,
then
there's a bit of a lag in the video. Yeah.
um and then this morning I had a bit of a thing with my dad, and I said to him something about not listening, and he was like, "Are you bringing up my disability?" And because he's like quite deaf, and and I was like, "There's a difference between hearing and listening," but he also he's also choosing to only wear one hearing aid, and he lost his other one. He will not go and get.
Typical
I'm
man.
like, oh, it is. I mean, then he's like, it's hard to get to the hospital. I was like, I will take you there myself and get you this other hearing aid. It's it's a whole thing. But so having that,
How
I
do
said,
how do you like manage? How do you manage taking care of your parents and then also taking care of yourself, like showing up for business and life and everything else?
well, I mean, I mean, this is getting a little bit personal, right? I mean, I've had the last couple of years, I wasn't working much in my business. I felt like I couldn't because I was trying to sort of help them and sort of obviously see them through different phases. And um, I mean, I've run them to between them 50 hospital appointments. I don't know how I've lost count of different,
Wow.
at least 5 different hospitals, whether it's doctors and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I haven't even counting. It could be, plus or minus 10. But yeah, it's heavy, and like being in an environment where it feels lower vibration, and being around that, like my money story or my whatever story constantly. And I'm like, oh. So yeah, I have to lock the door. I have to, like, we're learning boundaries, like it's not been it's not been easy, but I feel this, like, I've felt this sort of like surge within myself the last few months. I was like, oh, this is about me claiming my power back over this. I've been giving my power away to that situation and letting that sort of take over and become a bit of an excuse. And I was like, oh, I need to take my power back now. So
Hmm.
yeah, I've been going through that myself and creating more space, and a lot of the my people pleasing stuff, and like my expectation stuff, and like even like you know thinking they think I should be at dinner sitting at the table at 6 o'clock on the button, and if I'm not there, you know there's a problem or whatever. So it's just like carving out this, like, how can I be myself, honor myself, and
Wow.
then and the
Yeah.
expectations. And I mean, Ryan, I went to a funeral of somebody I don't even know a couple of weeks ago because it's like,
Oh, because of your parents? They
because
knew
of my
them?
parents, right? They asked me if I would do the driving, and we had to go pick up this other lady who was 92, and she needed assistance in and out of going to this funeral. And I just was standing there like this, like, weirdo, and 2 people came up to me and said, "Excuse me, who are you?" I'm at this person's funeral. And I was like, "I'm just the driver.
Like
I'm
like
sorry."
Wedding Crashers, but for a
Like,
funeral.
yeah,
Did you
right?
get eat all the good food?
Like a really bad soggy sandwich and some sausage rolls, right? It wasn't worth it for the sausage roll. Like, what?
Listen, I'm just here for the sausage rolls.
Like, I have this little lady that I'm helping stand up and sit down in the sit crematorium place, and what am I doing with my life? Like, I'm at funerals of people I don't even know. Like, bless him, John. I'm glad I was there. You sound like a nice man, but um, it was just a weird scenario. So I'm finding myself in these. I'm like, I should probably be working today, but no, I'm at this random funeral because I feel my parents asked me to go. They asked me to do this limit, like, do the driving and whatever. So yeah, I'm really trying to balance being this dutiful daughter with, like, priorities, and I'm like, gosh, like, this is a bizarre thing, bizarre place to be right now. But I'm earning so many brownie points, Ryan. I'm gonna have good karma for life. I feel
you're, you're
many
you're putting it
lives.
in the bank. This is gonna pay off for many lifetimes in the future, and you'll leave. It's like guilt free. You're there. You couldn't really do anymore. I
yeah.
mean, you guys have dinner every night together.
Uh, most nights, yeah, yeah. 6
Wow.
o'clock on the button.
Yeah. I know where you'll be tomorrow night. You guys must have just had dinner before our podcast interview.
I
Well,
did.
I went through, so before we moved in the house right now, like I said, we were living all together, cohabitating with my in-laws, and we would eat dinner pretty much every night at the same table. And after about 2 weeks of this, I wanted to kill myself. I, I needed a break. And it's like and at that point, you don't want to ruin a relationship. So you want to make sure that I would really have to watch what I say. And I'd ask myself, why is this happening? Like,
Mm.
why? And you mentioned the people pleasing and the boundaries. These are all things that I had to relearn again in this situation that were
Mhm.
not present when they weren't living there. And I think for a lot of us, there's a term called spiral dynamics.
Mm.
So it's when we grow, when we ascend, we sort of spiral up in our growth. Imagine like a tornado.
Yeah.
But then we also have a tendency to spiral back down into situations we may have been before, but as different people, because
Yeah.
we've grown.
Yeah.
So we come back to a similar situation, but in a different consciousness to experience it. And it's like I talk to people and they're like, why am I back here? I thought I healed this. Why is this happening again? Yes,
Mm.
just an opportunity to go and heal on a deeper level in a new consciousness.
Yeah.
So that was my lesson with my in-laws is we need a house with a separate suite, and there's something to heal here. And it's obviously same with my parents too. So as much as I want to hermit, I think the easy way out is I could easily get a cabin in the woods and not talk to anyone, but I probably wouldn't advance in this life.
Yeah. That's the Michael Singer surrender experiment, right?
Yes.
Like that's what he wanted.
Yeah. Yeah.
A hangout in the woods. But we don't grow that way, Ryan. We don't grow that way. There's that funny thing they say that if you think you've healed, go home for Christmas, And so like I've been at home, a while now, and we'd go a month, maybe 2 months, whatever, without an issue at all. And I'm like, I'm so healed. I have risen above. I'm so calm, and then like it'll just be like this, like, ding, and I'm like, oh, the trigger comes, and I'm like, I have not healed.
What's the thing? What's the thing that usually gets you?
Oh gosh,
The trigger.
being misunderstood.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, my intentions being misunderstood.
Interesting. I could relate to that. Yes. Yeah.
And
I think for me, it's when one of my in-laws starts talking a lot, and they start talking about their past, and the whole conversation comes about the memories of their past. And so I'm over here focusing on the forward moving energy that we're creating next, some amazing things we did today. And we're now having this whole conversation that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago. So in that moment, I'm like, okay, let me have compassion and let me listen, because there's definitely a part of me that's going, why the F are we talking about this? And so it's like, okay, let me have compassion.
Yeah, like I wonder if for both of us, quite ironic, we're in a similar situation, but whether it's like, oh, you think you're awake, healed, whatever, evolved, and it's like, if you can't hold that vibration, this is what I was sort of thinking, if I can't hold that feeling of joy and flow and love, faced with pretty difficult circumstances, are we there yet? It's like,
Exactly. Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
I can be good on my own, right? Like I am a happy camper, right? There's nothing, but it's like when you throw yourself into the circumstances and like there's things happening, it's like can I hold myself in these circumstances? So I think it's just
Yeah.
more spiritual lessons, right?
Yeah. It's like, can I hold myself totally and not, not get like so triggered to the point where you're like, I'm emotionally charged about what's going on. And maybe that's okay to go into it. But I often think, um, what can I do to serve like in this moment instead of judge or criticize or think the person needs to change, like how can I help? And sometimes it's listening, just being a great listener, and other times it's like helping them change their vibe,
Mm,
and like luckily they're super awake too, which is amazing. So
yeah.
I'm super grateful for everything. Like I'm just gonna put ice cream on top of shit here. So let me
Yeah.
just say I'm super thankful for everything they
Me
do.
too, me too. For sure.
So, but you're right. It's like, I mean, isn't that what we need to be doing is getting to a point where you feel like yourself and you feel great and you can lift other people up regardless of the situation, like if it's in-laws, parents, or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the practice. And I'm not there every day, but I do my best to be there every day. I kind of, to be honest with you, I think, well, how would I treat my in-laws if they were clients of mine? Like if I
Mm,
didn't know them, if I didn't know them and they weren't my in-laws, how would I see them differently?
yeah.
Right? Like I was listening to an interview with Tony Robbins, and he was saying if somebody shows up late for something, it has a different meaning to everyone. Some people get pissed off, some people are worried about the person, are they okay? Everyone has a different perception of it. But the
Mhm.
only reason that we would get upset about something is because it's happened in the past.
Mm, yeah.
So if I get upset with something a family member does, it's because it's happened before and I'm reacting to it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that spiritual practice, like you're saying, is to be aware of that and then just choose again, which is
Mm.
takes
Keep choosing.
takes
And
mastery to do that.
I'll say as well, I am grateful for the time I'm having with my parents. Whatever they're, in their late 80s, I'm not going to regret having spent some time with them. And I come back to that
Yeah,
often.
100%.
I'm like, whatever
Yeah,
happens, I'm not going to feel like I haven't, I lived overseas for the last 17 years. So I haven't had a lot of those
yeah.
opportunities to spend the time. And so we're catching up on a whole bunch at the moment. So, and I think that's, yeah, I will there's, yeah, no regrets at the end of the day. So, and not a lot of people get to spend like
Do you
this
have
time with them either. So that's good. What were
no?
you going to say?
Do you
Sorry.
have siblings?
I have a sister, younger sister, and two half brothers. So
Oh, okay. Does your younger sister live close to you?
she's about an hour and a half away and comes through quite regularly and spends time with them and whatnot. So yeah,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah. I have two older sisters. I'm the youngest. So when you talked about your mom being the middle, I know because my middle sister, our sister that's in the middle, yeah, I totally get that. Yeah,
I think there's a whole thing. Oh,
that's another layer of the family dynamics. I've said to people, in terms of money, having a healthy relationship with your parents is very important. I
mm,
actually find it quite a bit easier to create money and grow business and do things when I feel great with my parents. And when it's turbulent, I find it really does affect me to be able to do things. And the same thing with my sisters. My sisters and I are always good.
yeah,
I have a great relationship with both of them. But family plays such a big role in how you feel. Like, and especially like I'm sure the audience, your podcast listeners, they're awake people. We're totally often the black sheep, and not every family member always understands our world. It's quite different to their
yeah,
world.
yeah.
So embrace, and that's one of the lessons that I've really learned to get into flow is like, how do I embrace who I truly am without being worried about what other people will think of me?
Mm, That's
especially family.
Yeah. But I love that you're well, at least your in-laws are awake and sort of on board. That would be it's hard sharing a space, and we've had some stuff over the last couple of years because my parents think I'm nuts. So we've got that going on as well. So they think I'm positively bonkers most of the time in almost all of my views. So so that's been interesting. So
I
I
think
wanted
same here. Yeah.
it's just like I'm like but I think that it's that like coming to a place of acceptance of myself that that's okay too, that like they can think I'm nuts if they want, that's okay. While we actually, so you sort of mentioned about the parent dynamic, and I think and the money and all that kind of stuff, and I think one of the big parts of your teaching, and I know you've done sort of master classes with your wife on this as well, is the masculine feminine dynamic. And obviously we learn that from our parents, from our caretakers, the people that brought us up. I'd love you to just speak into that dynamic a little bit and how it then leads into flow. So
yeah, it's everything. Because if it's not harmonized, you'll feel it. And when it is harmonized, you'll feel it. Because that's when the flow starts to happen. But I mean, okay, let's take you for example. So if we can, I'm just going to put you on the spot. Sorry. On your own podcast.
No, I'm like, there's more stuff coming up than I thought there would be.
Okay, so do you ever, or maybe in your past, do you ever feel that you're too much?
Yes.
Okay. Do you ever feel that you're not enough?
I have done. I'm fighting that one.
Okay. Do you ever have, you feel like afraid to be seen?
Absolutely.
That's so funny. I wouldn't think that about you.
Oh,
because you're so good at branding.
Massive visibility issues. Like, I really had to force myself at the beginning. Total force. There was no flow at the beginning of my business. It was closing my eyes and pressing the button and thinking I might die. Kind of vibe.
You're so animated and charismatic.
Oh, I mean, this is a show, right? No,
Okay.
no, I'll be like, but really, no. I mean, I've had we briefly mentioned this before we even started, but a lot of my journey has been around my weight, and that's how I even started looking for answers to anything. If I sometimes joke that if I had been skinny, I would never have bothered looking for any answers. So the fact that I've had a weight issue, so that sometimes if I'm feeling bigger, I don't want to date. I don't want to be on stage. I don't want to do a photo shoot. I don't want to post a selfie. So that has been a journey with me not wanting, like, my feed is full of sort of photo shoots and things like that. That was such an edge for me to have a professional photo taken.
Wow.
Hated it. I've nearly cancelled every photo shoot I've ever done. Like the night before, I'm like, I feel fat, I feel horrible, I don't want to do this. So yeah, all of those kind of things. Like doing photo shoot. I mean, yeah, I've done some amazing ones now, and I look back and there's some of the highlights of my life. Like I did one in Paris, and like I had this line of cab drivers all whistling at me as I'm like posing on, bridges and in front of all this kind of stuff. And I find that very, very challenging. But deep down, Ryan, I don't know if you can identify with this as well. Have you had any visibility stuff ever?
Certain things, yes. Yeah, certain times where I'm concerned about the way I look or my hair or my clothes, or more so like if I look like shit because I didn't sleep because Noah was up.
Yeah. I heard that in one of your interviews. But yeah, it was so. Yeah. But deep down, when I dug into that, right? So obviously, I've had to do some digging on it, and once I got really underneath it, It wasn't a fear of being seen. Now, I stepped into a circle in a sort of week-long retreat, and I had been like sitting in the background, and the projector, right, we like to be invited into things, right, or sometimes it doesn't go well, so I'm very much like waiting, holding back, all this kind of stuff. But when I got in the middle of the circle on like day, I don't know, 10 or whatever, it took me a long time. I was shaking, and like everybody's looking at me. This is my worst nightmare. All these people in this room, 60 people looking at me in the center, and I'm shaking, and I can barely speak. I can hardly get my words out. And underneath was this massive desire to be seen, but in my true power. And that is
Yeah.
what came out, and it came out as
Yeah.
this like
Wow.
roar and scream and bawling, and like it was a whole mess. But but it was like interesting that this wanting to hide was actually hiding something else, like so often. I
Yeah.
know you've spoken
Yeah.
about it, it's like that we think we have a fear of failure, but we actually have a fear of success. So my fear of not wanting to be seen was actually kind of wanting to be seen and or acknowledged,
Yes.
I suppose,
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. It's like if I get into an argument, this would happen in the past. It doesn't happen as much now. And Chris and I would get into a huge argument. We'd blow up, and then she would take off and slam the door and go hide. She deep down wanted me to open that door and come get her.
Yeah.
So it's like, right, as much as she didn't want to be seen, she wanted to be seen. But yeah, that's why I asked is the feminine side of the harmonization of both the masculine and feminine.
Yeah.
So the paradox of it is, yeah, you want to be seen, but you also don't want to be seen. But deep down, the feminine comes alive. Like you're saying, you embrace the power, and then you're fully seen by this group of people. That's the ultimate, is like being fully seen in your power. But then it's the things not feeling good enough, feeling like too much, not feeling like enough, feeling misunderstood, not feeling heard, a fear of being seen, a fear of being rejected. And you may experience this too, where you can walk into a room and you can tell, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how much love is in that room.
For sure.
You can tell, like, if it's overflowing with love, or if it's just the love's been sucked out of the windows, like something's happened.
What's going on? What's happening?
Right?
For sure.
So in the terms of masculine and feminine, as it pertains to flow, feminine people, they get into flow when their heart feels full. When their heart is lit up and they feel safe and they feel they can open up to be them true selves, they flourish. That's when they get into this beautiful flow. And then you hit a moment where you don't feel as full of love, and then all the stuff comes back for a brief moment. Come back into it. That's the dance. It's a bit different for me because I'm a man, and you look like you're thinking of something for a sec. I didn't know if you were.
I was gonna ask. Okay, so on the I love the feminine on the safe and the opening heart. I was just gonna ask what the masculine version or feeling of that was.
Yeah, it's depth of consciousness, but it's also respect. So masculine men, they get I'll use myself for example. So I'll get into a flow when I'm clear-headed and I feel completely at peace. Perfect example, when we have a full house like we do today. I've got Chris working in the room next to me. Noah's probably downstairs with my mother-in-law. My father-in-law's home. There's a lot happening in the house. So the energy is stirred up.
Yeah.
When everyone leaves, the other day, everyone left to go run errands and do stuff. It was so nice. Like, it was so peaceful and quiet. That's when I get into my flow state.
Yeah.
Because I don't need to feel a fullness of love. I need to feel quiet and calm and peace. Then I get into the zone. So it's a bit different for me how I operate. So my test is when I'm around my in-laws, what we're talking about, around everyone else, is to be in that zone of presence, like deep presence in my masculinity, regardless how chaotic things are around me.
That's really
When I get in. That's when I go travel to these places. It's like I just feel dialed in. Like I ended up selling it. I can tell you a flow story on that. I used to have a BMW M4. It was my dream car at the time.
nice.
But I love driving fast cars because I can just eliminate all distractions and just dial straight in. Same thing with meditation. Same thing. I love running. I get the
Yeah.
runner's high. All those things, I can just remove the distractions and it's just focused in, and that's when I get into the flow.
Oh, that's so interesting. I'd never thought of car driving like that before. But yeah, that's so interesting. But a lot of it makes sense to me now. It suddenly sort of a little light bulb has come on.
You're going so fast, you don't have time to think.
Right.
Same when I ride bikes. Like, if I'm going down a hill 70 kilometers an hour, I don't have time to be like, do I feel good enough today or not good enough? Like, it's like, no, you mess up, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
So that's what masculine people love. They love. That's why masculine people go, skydiving, cliff jumping. They do crazy things where their life is at risk because it makes them. That's where a masculine man comes alive. So you take that away from a masculine man, and he becomes docile, and he won't feel alive. He needs that to get on his edge to feel alive.
Yeah, that's amazing. Tell me,
And take your dad skydiving.
he does enough. I can't. I mean, 87 and up a ladder yesterday trying to hang curtains and deal. So I'm like, let me help you with that. And he's like, get away from me. Anyway, so what was I going to say? So you run ultra marathons, right? And do these.
I've done one, yes.
But a lot of endurance feats and triathlons and all this kind of stuff, which is incredible. Yeah. I'm curious, actually, I was actually quite surprised when you said you're a projector, because we do have that propensity to...
People always tell me this.
Right? So...
Yes.
No. Where does this come from? Like, what is happening with these ultramarathons?
I have a friend that tells me the same thing, and she asked me if I'm a certain type of projector, and I didn't know, because she goes like, where do you get this ambition, this like drive to do this stuff if you're a projector? I don't know. I love doing things where there's the possibility of death present.
Oh God. Okay.
Whereas, my wife hates that. My wife hates running.
Oh my God.
It's so boring.
Like, Chris, oh my God. You're like, I'm just going to try and die.
She would rather go eat.
Oh.
Yeah, she would rather go eat great food at a restaurant and have a good conversation than do the things I do. What's the saying is, my idea of a good time is your nightmare.
Well, I used to do all that stuff. I used to do that. I pushed myself to the absolute limits. And now I feel like I don't have to prove myself. Maybe I'm just lazy. Okay. Maybe I'm just owning my laziness. But I think part of my stuff was I thought I was supposed to, or I was trying to prove something. But where does the drive?
Okay, yeah. No, I don't.
What is the drive for you to go and do an ultra marathon? Right, that's like, is it 50 kilometers or 50 miles? So
that was 50K. Yeah,
right, it's a long.
I'm very competitive. And so usually when I do these races, I'll place top 10, sometimes top 5 overall. Unless it's like a half marathon or marathon. There's just people that are stupid fast, but trail runs and stuff like that, it's pretty good. Yeah. Oh my God, there's guys that are just ridiculous. I got women passing me. Some women are just super athletic. But it's a spiritual process. It's got nothing to do with like validation or like, for me at least, like, look at me. It's when it comes down to it, it's this amazing feeling when I'm in the workout, and let's say I've worked out for like 40 minutes and I'm on the run, and all of a sudden I feel my soul leave my body. Like I feel alive.
Wow.
And there's some times where I can feel my soul floating above my body, and I'm watching my body run. And I'm not even thinking about running at all. And my legs are going, and Yeah, and so it's that addictive feeling of something supernatural that transcends the human experience. I feel at home, basically. So for
Wow.
me to like do these events and stuff like that, that's the feeling. I remember, when I did triathlon in San Diego. You've never done a triathlon, right?
Yeah.
Or have you?
Yeah. I used to back when I was
Okay,
trying
you
to
have.
prove
So have
something
you?
to myself.
Okay. Have you done, was it an open water swim? So it was out in a
Yeah.
lake or out in the ocean?
Yeah.
Okay, so you know this experience maybe. When you start, like I remember this one race, there's quite a few people because it was a half Ironman. There's several thousand people at this race, and it was just above the Mexican border in San Diego, and we all ran into the ocean. And I spent the first what felt like 2 minutes underneath people in the water, and I couldn't get my head above water because there's so many guys that are swimming on top of you,
And getting
and
kicked in
it's
the
like being in a
face.
washing
And
machine,
it's awful.
kicked in the face and everything. Yeah. So it's like, to me, it's like the ultimate spiritual practice in a sick way of surrender, because when your head is held underwater and you literally can't get it above water because there's so many guys above you. It's like, okay, let me just relax and hold my breath for a couple minutes and swim.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
yeah, that's why I do these things, because I feel it ascends my soul in some ways. And for some reason, exercise is like one of the few ways I can do it.
Mm. And I think men,
But that's the flow.
yeah, it's about getting, yeah, you're in your body, and there's something there. I felt that a few
Well,
times, like when I'm going and it's effortless. I've been in that space, but definitely not as many times as you, but like, yeah, it's an
but
amazing
exactly,
feeling.
you know it. But I mean, think about it. Like, how do you get back into your body? So for men, this is the way. Men either get back into their bodies through physical exercise, because most men are overthinkers and we're constantly thinking and compartmentalizing stuff. But the way men get back into their body is things like exercise, specifically repetitive exercise, walking, running, jogging, swimming, cycling. Or they could go into nature and just being in nature, because nature is feminine. It refuels them. They could drink a beer. Beer is feminine. I mean, it slows you down. It gets you into your emotions. Or wine, right?
Oh,
If you want to go in the masculine, you could do cocaine, or you could drink coffee. Coffee will accentuate your masculine. I've known clients that have told me in their past, before we worked together, they do cocaine and do sales, and they'd crush it in sales. I'm not recommending that.
Ryan's sales hacks 101.
Run a program on that. Full immersion process for 30 days.
God, you guys would be in this like crack house, just running $1 billion businesses, all like pumped up, just G'ing each
Like Wolf of Wall Street. Just pure masculine. Um,
Oh my god,
so coffee, masculine,
that's
but
so
even women, like, I've worked with guys that, go to strip clubs, or they watch porn, or they do something, and it's like, even them just being around or looking at a woman in her feminine sexual energy drops a man back into his body.
awful.
And that's a big issue that guys have, is they're, like I said, they're so in their heads. They need something that brings them back in their body and out of their overthinking. So you got to find, like, men need this, or else they become real angry.
Yeah,
So
wow.
they need the outlet.
They need a fast car and a stripper. Spiritual awakening or midlife crisis. We're not sure. Something's happening.
Men need a fast car and a stripper. What do women need? What's the woman's midlife crisis?
Oh my god. I'm probably in it, so let me see. Oh my goodness. So funny. I mean, I'm laughing, but I did once, just to get out of my own way, I did once drink a bottle of red wine and write a sales page.
Are you serious? I bet it was a sales
Oh, it
copy.
was such a good sales page because I was like, I am so amazing. I am going to change your life. You're going to do this and that, and it's going to be amazing. It was definitely the best sales page I've ever written, because I certainly wasn't. I wasn't in my head. I wasn't questioning anything. I was like, "Oh my god, this is so good. I'm going to change your
I
life."
said, I said to Chris,
So funny.
I said to Chris, she should start doing some lives with a glass of red wine. She's hilarious. You know, you two are very similar. She's very animated. She could have been an actress, and yeah, she'd be funny. Yeah, yeah. Maybe she watched a movie coming home. She was recently at an event,
Oh yeah.
and she watched My Big Fat Greek Wedding. I think
Oh, yeah.
4.
Maybe saw that
Like,
a long time ago.
like it was a newer one that came out or so. I've never seen any of them, but yeah, I feel like maybe the ultimate thing for women is like an amazing vacation with really good food and like nice weather,
I'm
and
available
to
for
get away.
that. I'm going to put that down. Make that a business expense. It was like, Ryan said I needed. Funny. I've not been
Yeah,
drinking.
that's the therapy.
I used to. I mean, you can laugh about what the different. I mean, but honestly, well, so I haven't been drinking, which I'm very proud of. I had 3 glasses of champagne over Christmas, and that was it. But yeah, I just haven't been feeling. I mean, I was somebody that used to be blackout drunk a couple of times a week in my 20s, so I've come along. I've
Wow.
come a long way in terms of that. But funny though.
God, you must have been funny when you were drunk.
Oh, I mean, I think I'm funny. That's the problem, right? I think I'm really funny, and then I'm pretty sure I'm not after a while.
So what made, because I don't drink alcohol. I used to party and drugs and everything, but I just don't have a desire for it anymore. But like,
Yeah.
what made you kind of cut back?
Um. Partly my body couldn't process it. So
Mm,
and the hangovers were getting worse. Like 3 glasses of wine, and I was still feeling it 3 or 4 days later. And
same,
I was like,
same for me.
"Oh,
Yeah.
this. My body is saying this is not for you." So I don't not drink. Like, I was at my cousin's 50th a couple of in November, and I drank plenty. So, if occasionally I still will. I'm not a big one of saying I never will, or I'm not going to. I want to be able to enjoy a glass of red wine if I want to, whatever. So, I'm not saying I'm teetotal, but yeah, the urge isn't there so much. Also, it was so much of it was escapism. Like in my 20s, I
Mm,
didn't know who I was. Also, that sort of visibility thing, or being self-conscious or whatever.
yeah.
After the amount of alcohol I drank, I was just there was no my self-consciousness went away. But interesting, actually, Ryan. So I was, I would have said, definitely in my 20s and some of my 30s, I was operating very much from my masculine. So my linear thinking, I used to sort of joke that I was cut off at the neck, like I was so in my head and not in my body.
Mm,
And so very disconnected, very, I worked hard. I did the career thing and whatever. So, and so when I was in my masculine, and I know this, there was, I wasn't attracting masculine men because there was no polarity.
feminine men.
And
Yeah.
but I had this massive crush on a rugby player, and ended up dating him, sort of, uh, when we'd meet on nights out, and I had already had 6 vodkas, and I'm like, la 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 la, fit, no, not a care in the world, and no self-consciousness or whatever. And we would connect, and it was amazing, and and if we're out and having a good time. But when I wasn't drunk and I was more in my masculine, that there wasn't the polarity went away. And so I remember him
Yeah.
saying something like, I'm I can't remember quite how he worded it, but it was basically saying he wasn't as attracted to me unless we were on a night out or something like that.
Mm,
And it wasn't until years later I was like, oh, because
yeah.
I wasn't overthinking things, or
Yeah.
shut down, or with my guard up or hiding away or whatever it was, when I was being this sort of more unfiltered version of myself, he liked me. And when I was
Yeah.
more closed off, he didn't feel the attraction. And so that ended obviously, and it wasn't until looking back on it many years later, I was like, oh, right. But
Yeah. Men are very pulled towards the women's sexual essence, sexual openness, and just feminine openness in general. But yeah, that's what I was saying. Alcohol's feminine, so it just brought you out in your natural essence.
and go on.
Well, I see we hear this all the time because the people we work with, and then obviously, Chris's work is primarily around helping women step into their feminine radiance and power. And I hear it a lot from women where they want to communicate with their man, but they don't know how to not sound bitchy or naggy.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's something they want him to get done around the house, they're like, how do I talk to him? So with guys, the number one thing that's most important to us is respect. And there will be a power struggle. So let's say that she hasn't been respecting him. He'll find a way to get the power back. So he might say to her, like, I don't love you, or ignore her, which is a form of control, because he's trying to get his power back and feel respected, especially if she's primarily inner masculine. So it does take a softening into the feminine, and it'll sort of like, sometimes it does take a masculine man, though, to kind of suck the masculine out of the woman so she can soften into her feminine. Because if you don't trust him, you're not going to soften.
Yeah.
Right? If you don't trust the rugby guy when you're not drinking.
I think, I mean, there was anyone listening to this, but like, there were a few rugby guys, Joe. But so bad, Ryan, so bad. But I lived on an island. I lived in Bermuda for most of my 20s, and very small island, so the dating pool was small, and
was it just all rugby men on the Bermuda Island?
pretty much. Well, I played rugby. I mean, that's how much I was in my masculine. I played rugby, and I was the chairwoman of or tag rugby, but I was the chairwoman of Bermuda rugby for a while. So it's very much in my more masculine side. But what was I going to say? I found out though that my office and my second job when I moved there was actually right next to a star fort, like literally across the street.
Oh, no way.
Star fort. And I basically sat there all day, every day for 4 years next to a star fort. And it took me, I was like, what happened? But I think there was obviously a lot of energy, and a lot of whatever was happening was I being activated, or I don't know what was happening to me there. I was so unconscious, but I think I didn't know what to do with all that. So I think I drank a lot to mask or to cope or to sort of block it out, whatever was going on, because I was so unaware. I did have a few spells there of not drinking and getting into my triathlons or whatever, but there was a lot of booze happening. And I felt one of the reasons I left Bermuda was because I felt like I couldn't stop drinking and live there at the same time. Like the two things were so intertwined, and leaving and starting afresh was easier for me. Yeah, just wild. But I was going to say, what was I going to say? Oh, the feminine. But I realized underneath, when I dug and dug and dug and dug, the bit that I didn't want to show was my vulnerability. And that was the piece of the puzzle for me.
Yeah.
That I was like, oh, I can do all these other things. I can like wear a dress, put my lipstick on. I was always dolled up. But it was the vulnerability piece that just didn't happen when I was sober, I suppose.
Was it like, were you dating? Was it a man that helped you discover that, or was it just your own self-awareness when you were sitting in the star fort and being activated to another dimension?
It took another 10 years after that before I realized.
So it wasn't like a certain moment, it just kind of over time.
I think it was actually a Tony Robbins seminar. working with this feminine coach, and I didn't understand it until Tony Robbins explained it. So I needed femininity mansplained to me. Like some little bell went off, and I was like, "Ah, I get it." But yeah, that is literally what happened. But it was at his Date with Destiny like week-long seminar, and you're just immersed in it, and it was a huge focus of this week, and I was just like sat there with my mouth hanging open, like what is he saying? Like, just explained all of my past relationships, why nothing had worked, like just really yeah, it was wild. And I remember he had this woman, and he was sort of explaining, she was standing there in a dress but in her masculine, and he was saying about how, because she was kind of like, well, I'm obviously feminine, I'm standing here in a dress, and he said something about like, you can be, masculine in a dress and feminine in your pajamas. It's a state of being. It's not what you're wearing. And and I was like, oh, anyway. So I had a lot of bells going off that week, and yeah, it was a big awakening week for me, actually. Like, just something coming back to me. Like, I'd been sort of dating this guy, another lovely tall man, and he, but there had been a sort of, again, this polarity thing of like, I had again been more in my masculine, and I was like, again, why had this not been quite working? And I got news that week in Date with Destiny that he had died in an accident.
Wow.
And I just was like, so I had like literally had these a lot like light bulbs going off. I'm like, oh my God, I get it. And I was supposed to go back and go to his birthday like the following week. And I was like, I've had this epiphany. It's all gonna work out. I figured it out, and then he passed away. And I was like, just it was unbelievably hard, like this week of just disbelief. And like, it was weird because I just sort of figured out all that stuff, and then he was gone, and I was like, wow, it was just really crazy. But anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but
Yeah. Well, it's like you didn't even get a chance to talk to him.
no, we never got I never got to have that conversation.
What are the chances it would happen when you're at Date with Destiny?
It was nuts. Yeah. But it was in a really key moment in a process as well. Like, we had just done our this values exercise, and we were sort of in the middle, and we had to go back into the room and reassess our values. And then I had this like bit in the middle, and in the middle of assessing my values, going from success, money, outcome focused, having this like massive wake up call, and then sort of going back in the room and like recalibrating what is important. And I was like, oh my God, like, all the things I thought were important are just not important at all. It was a weird.
Death is a funny way to do that to people. It gets us to reassess our life and what we value and what's important to us. It's pretty cool going through that process of a identity change or a value or belief system change. Masculine and feminine stuff is a very interesting dynamic because since I was a kid, I could pick up people's energies and emotions. If I walked into a room, I could sense everything. But now having the skill set around masculine and feminine, which I worked with our life coach for years to develop that skill set to be able to help people. I walk into a mall now, and I can look at a woman and I can know exactly if she's in her masculine or feminine, where she's having blockages of energy in her body because of one or the other. I can do the same thing for a man. I was at the meat store yesterday or the other day, and there's a man in front of me, and he was breathing very shallow but slow, and you could just sense something was off with him, and so I'm like, okay, do I tell him he should breathe deeper, but I just kind of watched him. I didn't say anything to him. I have a tendency not to try and say anything to anyone that isn't asking for my help,
Yeah.
unless there's a real strong push from God to step in. But I mean, I remember this other woman I was walking through, like London Drugs or something, which, they sell like everything under the sun kind of stuff. And I could tell that she was inner masculine, but she's actually core essence feminine, and she's carrying all this weight on her shoulders. There's tension. You could tell by the way she's walking.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just interesting how, like, when I'm in tune with it, you can see it on people. They're like wearing it. And
Yeah.
then when they go through what you said, like a shift, if I'm working with someone and then they are able to come back into their natural core essence, whether it's feminine or masculine, they're like, I hear this all the time. It's like a letting go of all that tension, and they can relax into themselves again. And then, we talked about either it's filling up their heart or it's getting on their edge and they're masculine.
Yeah.
It's a cool feeling. It's very cool to see people like they physically change, and their energy changes, and it's like, they come back to who they are.
Yeah, it is amazing to see that. You mentioned God a second ago, and I would love to ask, if you have a few more minutes, just tell me a little bit about your faith and how it sort of works in with, I suppose, the spiritual principles, or how you apply it in your life and business. I would love to know what sort of role that plays. That's a big question.
How do I explain this one? Well, I refer to my faith as God, and everyone has different takes. Some people say the universe, some people say source. For me, it's God. And I don't have a faith connected to religion per se, like traditional structured religion. But I do definitely have a connection to Jesus and the Holy Spirit and the Trinity of that, in which I can feel that. I've been able to feel Jesus's energy since I was a kid, but I was raised Christian. So we went to church and we went to Sunday school, and I just always felt like, for me at least, there's something. It could have been the pastor or the teachings. There's something didn't feel aligned for me, but I did have a connection to Christ. And so, now it's like I just simply pray to God and feel it. It's like very feeling based to me. Like I can feel God's presence, and then I feel aligned, and I start to get into the flow from there. And if I'm out of the flow, like I can feel my day could be chaotic. I live up on the mountains, so I'm very blessed. I have access to the forest. It's literally like a 30-second walk.
Amazing.
So I just walk 30 seconds to the forest, and I spend a bit of time alone, and I feel like, boom, super connected. 20-minute walk and I'm good. So, that faith it was a quest. I mean, it still is, because I started off being raised a Christian, and then I explored different spiritual avenues like Buddhism and, the way monks live, and sort of their philosophy of, I guess, mindfulness and sort of doing things one thing at a time. And then I came into sort of the New Age philosophies, and then I transitioned into like everything you're talking about, learning a little bit more about the Bible's teachings and the Nephilim and old world buildings, and this, what I believe is the whole past civilization who built a lot of the buildings that we preoccupy today. We did not build. That's a different conversation for another episode.
Maybe a whole other episode for that. I'm like, are we opening that?
Especially where you live, Europe. Yep. Spain, Scotland, Germany, London. There's just so many old world buildings that I believe were the descendants of the Atlanteans. So the same gene line that understood pretty crazy technology, how to work with energy and frequency and sound.
Yeah.
So then I started exploring that, and then I started studying the Bible more. But I have a bit of a different take on the Bible from other people, I think, where I think it's a hologram. So there is a book that's called the Bible Code, and there's a mathematician in Israel, and he was able to create a computer code that would read the Bible, and the Bible has created, I mean, it has, I think, over 2,000 prophecies that have come true, maybe 2,500. But things that were happening in the future, the Bible were predicting before they happened. So he was able to type in certain names of like presidents that may be assassinated or events that would happen, and this computer code through math would spit out the verse of the Bible where it states that it happened.
What?
So I think it's much more complex than just, following, the Bible's teachings. Like, I'm getting chills talking about this. I believe God wrote it, whatever's supernatural. It's been written supernaturally 100%. And I think it taps into past, present, future, for those who are maybe aware of its possibility to do that. But without a doubt, this guy created the mathematical sequence that he's proven it does predict future events.
Wow.
So kind of brings back to, like, is the past, present, and future all happening at one time?
Yeah.
So then I came back, and this is where I'm at today. It's like, I left sort of the new age philosophies that, like, all the answers are inside of you, and that, and I came back to my belief and faith in God, and just be like, how can I be of service to God? God, please guide me, like, show me the way. And yeah, that's where I'm at today.
Wow. I have a very similar sort of journey with it. And that's why I sort of asked, because I'm sort of in that space of believing in God and having a connection to Jesus, and not being in the part of a prescribed religion or church, because I think there's all sorts of issues with that can be a little too much. There's issues, and I find that what's the way to put it? I don't like to sort of I don't know, like I don't like to back a single, not I'm not referring to God, but like as in like a religion, or sort of putting something, how do I say this without sounding I'm trying to think, like even a spiritual teacher, right? So I might have said, in the past I follow, trying to even think of somebody as an example, a certain spiritual teacher, but now knowing that some people are flawed, some people are a little bit what's the word, maybe not as pure, or they might have been a little bit infiltrated by something, or their teachings are like mostly good but there's a little bit bad. So I sort of question all that, right? So I don't want to just blindly follow this spiritual teacher or that spiritual person or whatever. Same goes for politicians. While I might like some of their politics, I'm not going to blindly commit my allegiance to them in whole or for what they represent, because I don't know what that is in totality. And I have a sort of similar feeling with some of the church, and some of it, like a lot of it resonates, and then there's these pieces that I'm like, I don't know if I want to take all of that on. Do you know what I mean? Like, so it's
there's without a doubt there's areas of religion and new age that have been infiltrated by certain spiritual teachers 100%. And I mean, I don't know if you know this, but Sinead O'Connor, like, she passed away obviously, right? But did you ever see on Saturday Night Live what she did with the Pope? You must know that where you live. Tore up the photo of the Pope. That was in 1992.
Wow.
And and she got a lot of hate she got ridiculed for that. And she said that she would have a lot of anxiety before she would go out to perform after that happened. It was really hard for her. So when you start to do, without going too deep into all of it, the research and where things line up, that's what did bring me back to Christ and brought me back to God with a capital G. And not so much placing my faith in, idols or false idols. And I even linked up a lot of things when I started studying the old world buildings and the Nephilim, and, seeing, the sort of spiritual war that has been happening for a long time. and it's happening today with us. So yeah.
I'm just aware of the time.
I was going to say, I think this is why. I think this is why on social media, like you're probably noticing this. I really notice people are craving connection and authenticity. They want real people. They want to feel you're real, and they want to feel connected to you. And that's where I'm noticing things are shining really well.
Absolutely. Just before we start, like you've mentioned, you sort of in the last sentence you threw in spiritual war. And I know it's a massive topic, but in your sort of going into, we're obviously at the beginning of 2024. This is the, I don't know, middle of January. What do you see as being that battle that's upcoming? Like, okay, there's been a lot in the past, but what do you see as being this year, or maybe where people have to hold the line, or be really that's, I don't know. I think you know what I'm trying to say. Can't articulate.
Well, I don't know for certain what would happen, but what I do believe in my heart, if I truly tune in, is we are seeing a dismantling of the powers that be that work off controlling humanity from fear. And I believe we're seeing not just a shift in consciousness, and I talked about the ascension symptoms, so people growing in consciousness and starting to think for themselves and breaking free of a spell that's been placed on us, cast on us, but also the realizing that they don't need to live in the fear of the matrix or whatever's been happening and kind of be told what to do and follow orders. People are really starting to think and realize for themselves. But I do think that there's been so much conditioning, even from the early 1800s. There was a huge reset that happened in the 1800s. And so we're kind of like waking up from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's going to be turbulent times this year in particular. Like I mentioned, we're renting this house. I personally wouldn't buy anything this year. This is going to be an interesting year because there needs to be a shift in the finances and the financial markets worldwide.
Yeah.
And, you have people like Warren Buffett that are cashing out billions of dollars in stocks right now, turning it into liquid. And then we have the US election that may or may not happen towards the end of this year. So I do expect it to be a turbulent year. But I think that will make way for a different way of living, so to speak. It's like we've been infiltrated. You talk about your show is the flow show. It's like, I feel like that's how we're meant to live. We're meant to live in flow. We're meant to live in God's kingdom, and that's how things naturally work. And it's like we've been infiltrated to live a different way that is not of God. And so I thank you for doing shows like this, because it helps us come back to like this beautiful way that we can get into a flow, which is the God wink.
Yeah. And it woof. Yeah, there's so much in all that. And I think the bit that we need to keep coming back to this, I'm like, it's going to be turbulent, but there's some sort of golden era. There is
it's gonna be fun.
Something good on the other side. And I think coming back to that, and one of the other, I level, I'm obviously not an astrologer, but I love listening to Pam Gregory. She's one of my favorites. She's an older lady, an English lady, and she's so calm, she's so peaceful, and she delivers this stuff. She just says, come back to love. And, she's very nice, but she's like your old auntie or something. She's just such a sweet lady. But she was saying that this year she's also a very powerful woman. She's not just a sweet lady, but she's talking about power to the people. She's like, this is a year of awakening, but the other, she's calling it power to the people. And the way that the astrology is flowing is there's moments where they are going to try and sort of inflict their will on us. And then there's going to be the pushback. And like astrologically, the people win overall. It's like the way it's mapped out, like talk about the Bible predicting the future. Not that astrology is like a prediction, but if she correlates, she looks at things like okay, the last time we had this transit was in the 1750s, and there was a huge, they had the French Revolution or something like that. My details will be slightly off the way I've remembered that, but it's that kind of energy is coming back of revolution and uprising, and the people saying, actually, we're not going to, and we're seeing that, in Europe. You maybe don't see this, obviously in Canada. Well, you had your truckers thing, then they've got they've got farmers in Germany and the Netherlands, and they're all kicking back and saying this isn't working for us. So you don't see that on the news, of course, but it's this kind of so there's the feeling, and the overall feeling is it's going to be okay, but they're not going to let this go without a fight, kind of idea. So
yeah, they've been working on this for a long time. One of the things that I personally do is like what you said about the astrologer. Coming back to love, it's being in that flow state. That's a practice for me every day. But also for me to feel safe in that, as far as the future is concerned, is knowing I can't control it. But I also let my mind wander and go, all right, what would life be like if there was no monetary system anymore? There was no money anymore, and we were bartering and trading. It was, or if it was based off the gold standard, or it was digital, let's say. What would happen if there were no school systems anymore, and that system became deleted? Where there's no more school systems the way it operates now, or medical system, or there's no more pharmaceutical drugs. Like I let my mind go to these structures that we have been all taught are the normal way of living. What if that reality is we're transitioning out of it into something greater? And what would it be like to live that way? So for me, it allows me to feel safe to think of a different reality that is like something of greater that we're stepping into, but also it makes me feel comfortable knowing if that ever was to happen and the old structures would fall apart, I'm totally safe with it. Like I'm cool with it, right? I'm not attached to it. So, I'd like to be there to help people that are, that are going to go through some challenging mental, changes with it.
Yeah, I think our skills are needed this year. Can you share a little bit about how you do support people and work with them, and what you've got going on?
Yes. So I've got a bit of a transition happening right now. My focus with people is their purpose. Right. So Chris is helping the girls with their feminine radiance. You want to come live your purpose? Come talk to me. Basically.
Love that.
But where I really love to help people is the masculine and feminine, and helping them move through any challenges that they're facing. And honestly, it's a lot of the inner work. Yeah. It's a lot of things that they feel could be stopping them from creating what they want. They're getting in their own way somehow. And when I work with men, it's always about helping them with consistency and getting on their edge to live their purpose. And when I'm working with women, they typically have some turbulent things happening in their life, or like what we talked about, there's a fear of being seen, being too much, not enough, whatever the case is. Yeah. And so, when they feel integrated and like when you at the event fully seen and like shared who you are, that's when I watch them shine too. So my tagline I have on Instagram is the spiritual approach for getting out of your own way to unleash your greatest purpose. Nice. And that is my focus.
Beautiful. Yeah. And the best way to find you, I will obviously link this in the show notes, but you mentioned Instagram earlier, and
Instagram is good. Instagram is the best place. If anyone has any questions or want to connect with me, just send me a DM. And then also my podcast, the Soul Wealth Podcast. I do episodes once a week. I've been doing that for 5 years. So that's a good place if they want to listen and learn some value on purpose and getting in your own way, and then masculine and feminine stuff as well. But those are the two places.
Beautiful. And I can highly recommend that, having listened to about 10 episodes in the last 24 hours. So your stats will be up there, They'll be like, this chick really likes his podcast. I'm going to be getting served it all the time. But yeah, it was great.
Yeah, I felt like, I know we've gone for a couple hours here. I feel like there's so many topics that you and I could have went deeper into that we'll share. Maybe I'll have you back on my podcast.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Yeah, I think there's a few things we're kind of like skating around because I'm like, oh my gosh, we're going way over time, and then, but yeah, I mean, what you have shared today, there's been some moments where I'm like, just the way you've articulated some things, I've never heard them quite put like that before, and I almost will have to like listen back to I didn't catch like just a few ways that you just worded things. I'm like, so good, so nice, and just hearing something in a different way and how it just lands differently, and it's like it goes a little deeper. It was yeah, really, really awesome. And you've obviously made me
Well,
share
same
things
for
I was
you.
not
I
planning
mean,
on sharing.
I have that tendency with people. Sorry about that.
I must have been feeling
Um,
safe or something in your masculine
yeah,
vibes that I've
yeah.
like shared stuff.
You know, it's always a pleasure talking to you. Just such a great flow. Yeah, and thank you for having me.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
like one of these rare conversations where you feel like you're just talking just the person and there's no audience. So it's great.
I'm gonna have like
Yeah.
a vulnerability hangover. Like I'm like,
It was so,
oh God, what did I say? I'm like, can I go and cut all that out and edit it out? But no, I will leave it, even though I do already feel a little bit of that like, oh, coming up. So, but yeah, that's a
yeah.
good thing. It's a
Yeah.
good thing. I'll get over it.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll move through. It'd probably be a really good episode. But I also want to thank you. One of my biggest takeaways talking to you is how I can relate to everything you're going through. It's like, oh my God, there's other people that are experiencing this same thing. And we've been on a very similar path anyway since we first met, as far
Yeah,
as business and our beliefs.
yeah,
And I'm like, oh, it's so good. I think, I needed that to affirm I'm not alone with this process that I've been in for the last 3 years.
yeah. Do you find that I think there's a few of us on the same timeline, like that I follow, and like there's one guy posts, and I'm like,
Mm.
down to, I'm like, oh, it's like there's some of us are on these we're obviously on different timelines, but some of us are sort of synced, and we're sort of learning the same lessons at the same time. Do you know it?
Mm-hmm.
Like even
Mm-hmm.
you've been
Yeah.
called like literally back to 5 minutes from your homeland. I felt like called back to this. There's a piece about being called to your homeland, which I feel is happening. Like people are going home to where they were born or feeling that urge, and I just feel like there's some alignments. I'm sure when you're coaching people, like sometimes just in one day, I'm like, oh, today is Mother Wound Day.
Mm.
You feel these
Day.
themes, and so obviously we're working through whatever with our parents or in-laws and things like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
we have to work through it and heal it so as we can hold the space for others.
Well, it's going to be very cool to see what opens up and happens in the next year, 2 years, 5 years. And I know, I feel it in my heart, Joanna. I know that we are coming into some amazing times for
Mm,
people. And I think one of the things that actually like excites me and like makes me like come alive the most is seeing people be free.
mm,
Free of like having to work and not being able to be home with their kids, free of like depression and anxiety and things that, loneliness people struggle with and they don't tell other people, like
yeah.
just to see the frequency rise in the cities and around the world is like, it's going to be so freaking rad.
It's cool.
Like it's going to shift how people feel about themselves and others for the better.
Yeah.
And I can feel it's coming. And I hope and I pray it happens in our lifetime. I mean, how amazing would that be? Like if we live in a completely different world in the next
I
few
think
years.
I think it's we're almost there. Like I think it's and I'm sure you've felt this as well, this speeding up, because we've obviously been on this
Yes.
path, and I know you've been working on yourself for a long time. Um I find that, so some of my awakenings and realizations have taken me 15 years. Right? Like
Mhm.
sometimes spirit
Me
has
too.
taken me 15 years to learn some of this stuff. I'm seeing people come online, have massive breakthroughs, awakenings, healings in 6 months. Like they're gone from like fully no awareness to like exactly the same kind of levels of consciousness, beliefs, awareness as it took me 15 years.
Yeah, it's sped up.
It's wild to me, absolutely amazing. Like some of my clients over the last couple of years have been those people who have just like popped. Worked. We've worked through some stuff, and they're there, and like they have this this wisdom that is like where does this come from? This is amazing, but it's just happening so quickly, so quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's beautiful to
yeah. I mean, you imagine what's going to happen. I mean, that's amazing. And you imagine what's going to happen when collectively everyone starts doing that. It's like this shift that's gonna happen and open up for people. It's really cool. And then I think from the adventure side of me, the life path number 5 side of me is I want to go explore new worlds. Like if I could go beyond the ice walls and go see what's on there, that'd be very cool. I want to go explore some vast lands that are not on our map.
I mean, I don't know if we're gonna get there in our lifetime. I mean, maybe. I don't know.
But for now, I'm cool with what's happening.
What on one of your podcasts, not that I've been stalking you at all, but I think you said you'd love to visit Egypt, and like where else is on your list of places you want your bucket list?
You've been there, right? Egypt?
I haven't. It's on my list.
I thought you had.
No, I need it's been looming. It's there. Feels like the final piece of the puzzle.
There's a few places. Egypt is on the bucket list. And I missed going to the Grand Canyon when I was in Sedona. So I'd like to go back there.
Yes.
Some crazy energy over there.
Yes.
And then Europe.
Yeah.
I'd love to go to Scotland, Ireland, like I said, Germany. I want to see the old castles, the old world buildings. And then another one on the bucket list is Kauai in Hawaii. Nice. So that area, it's a little bit more rainforesty, but it's supposedly where some of the Lemurians went. So the land is very heart-centered.
Oh, nice.
So that's another place I want to go. And then Australia. I have a deep connection to Australians. I work with quite a few Australians I have over the years.
Yeah.
So I would like to go over there too. And awesome. Eventually, I've never been to Japan. So that's on the list too. And Vegas. I don't have a desire to go to Vegas, but I think we may be going there this year. I can just intuitively feel it. Chris has got a convention for her company in Vegas. So although I think that place is going to tear me up, but I'll go there.
It's so close to the Grand Canyon, so Vegas is.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And I think it'd be so interesting to go back. I did a really cool trip down the Grand Canyon many moons ago. 10 days whitewater rafting. Like it was so cool.
Yeah.
I'd love to go back now with a different awareness and look at it again. And I was amazed by it, but I wasn't thinking it was melted stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I believe the Grand Canyon was an old melted city, or is. Yeah. It was one. It's really interesting when you read in the Bible. It talks about how God struck the earth with is it ferment heat, like hot heat, and melted buildings, massive buildings that are now rock. So I think at one point everything was bigger. I think the trees were bigger, the buildings were bigger, everything was bigger than it is now.
Yeah.
The people were bigger.
For sure.
Actually, a lot of the giant skeletons have been found out in your hood.
Really? We all
so a lot of them are dug up. Okay, yeah, maybe it was, but a lot of them are like 9 to 12 feet tall, kind of thing. Wow. It's very interesting. Yeah, there's so much history that has been changed, But that's a part of the process of the awakening, because they had to scrub history. They had to scrub the books because they needed to indoctrinate people so they could create this reality that they've created that we live in now. If they exposed all the other stuff, it would have altered the timelines.
Yeah.
But you can't.
I was
Yeah,
thinking
it's
today,
coming
like,
out.
because like Joe Rogan and those guys, he's had Randy, is it Randy Carlson, and who's the other guy I love listening to? Graham. Oh, his name is,
Hancock.
yes. And they talk about the younger Dryas and like that sort of time about 11,000 years ago and all this kind of stuff. And this basically this big flood. And then I was listening to something you were talking about with, Noah's Ark, and I was like, it was a big flood. And like, and I was starting to sort of like, oh, hang on a second. And sort of, those guys who are sort of more on the scientist side of things, looking at, old maps and the topography and all this kind of stuff, and then it's lining up with the stories. And I mean, it's so fascinating to me. I just don't know. I feel there's so much more to learn in that regard, and even the Bible, like there's so much of it has been removed or
yes, yeah,
erased or hidden.
A lot of it.
I'd love to read that stuff. Like, like that. Must be the really good stuff. Like, I know
we sell that on Amazon.
I mean, I know we've both been so heavily like sort of censored and shadow banned and whatnot online and on socials, and it's the good stuff that gets, hidden, right? So it must be the good stuff that they've hidden from us, I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of, in the studies I've done, there's been big resets through the 1800s where there were massive cities that were completely desolate, and all of a sudden they started being occupied by humans that didn't build any of these cities. It's very bizarre. And then of course there's photos of what it looks like construction workers building these buildings, but a lot of them, if not all of them, are superimposed. They're montages, so they're just created photos to make it look like we've built these elaborate, insane buildings all built out of gold and star forts and sacred geometry. They're all sound healing, energy harnessing buildings. I mean, nobody builds buildings like that anymore. No, we don't even know how to build a building that they don't build them. They don't build them for a reason. But from what I had heard, like a lot of the churches, like they took the bells out because the bells align your chakras and they get your energy centers working properly. They cracked all the bells, but yeah, a lot of the churches and whatnot they still have organs and these bells, and then they would, you could program them to emit love or whatever you want, and then that would emit that frequency through the whole city. So if you did that today, you could take a derelict area like East Hastings, where I live, where there's a lot of homeless people, and just emitting that frequency would raise the frequency of somebody who's homeless and change and alter their thinking and alter their feelings into a higher vibration. Like that's what I think it's going to take. It's not just like the individual sort of moving through the triggers and the work. It's going to take this collective raising of the frequency somehow. Yeah. And right now, we have cell phones and we have Wi-Fi and data and radiation. We're still getting a frequency hit, but it's not of high God frequency.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's another conversation.
We're going to have to work even harder to combat that shit.
So if we ever do have a blackout, I actually look forward to that day, because I think having the technology knocked out, even if it was for like 48 hours, I actually think it would raise the frequency of the planet.
Ooh.
I really do.
It'll be chaos, but I was also thinking like they can't leave it off for too long because they want to bring in their digital currencies and all the things.
Yeah, they need it.
I was actually, because I was like, is it going to be off for months? What kind of level of chaos are we talking about here? Because they're currently in big meetings at the moment modeling this stuff. So yeah, but then I remind myself that they do need it, but is it going to come back in a different form with different things, and permissions and whatnot? So yeah, it'll be interesting interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Do you remember when Facebook went down
Yes.
for like the day?
Yeah. It was so
Right when
peaceful.
they were transferring to Meta,
Yeah.
and it shut down. And I had so many people that posted once it came back online. God, I need to build my email list. Like,
Yeah. Right.
they have no
Note to self.
social, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like, I have a very positive outlook on everything. I believe it's going to be very good for everyone. We're
Yeah.
moving in that direction. There's so much I don't know that's happening behind the scenes, but I have a gut feeling there's good things happening,
Yeah.
and there's things that are getting cleaned up.
Yes.
Mhm.
And I think there's already teams and teams of people working on alternative solutions for our good.
Yes.
And knowing
Yes.
that gives
Yeah.
a lot of comfort.
Comfort. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think we need to believe that, because if you don't have that belief, like, well, we could have been wiped out years ago, easily.
Yeah.
So you got to believe that there's good in the world and there's good things happening, and we are progressing in a positive way.
Yeah.
In a positive way. But I mean, what a crazy time to be alive, like,
Right.
really.
Did we volunteer for this? Oh. My projector self is like, exhausted. But I think, like, with what we've been sort of both similarly going through the last couple of years, I think it's happened now, or up until now. I feel like now is we're sort of this shift in energy. Not just because it's a new year, but there's more shifts at play. But I think I've had a rest. Like, that's what it feels like. I've like, as much as it hasn't maybe always felt like that, but I feel in some ways it was like the calm before the storm, and that's how I sort of view it. And I know you've had a break from your podcast for 6 months, and like it's like you've had your rest, and it's like, guys, it's kind of go time again. Like, especially as projectors, and we're here for this bigger mission. So
it's interesting you bring that up, because I can feel that. I can feel it. Like, it feels like we had 2 to 3 years full on, and then we kind of, like, 2 years, and then we kind of took a break for a year, and now we're ramping up to whatever comes this year.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But I feel like it's in a better consciousness than it was in the past, because we've learned some things, So coming into it in a better way, more loving way.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Me too.
I'm so glad we had this conversation.
Yeah.
To just hear what is going on in your life and how I can relate, and just, what's going to happen for this year. And at the end of the day, I can't control that, and I can control just being here, and that's it.
Yeah.
Where I am in the moment.
Really, really, what I've figured out I need to focus on is, as my wise sister says, control the controllables, right? Like, there's some things that there's no point in me worrying and stressing about. What can I focus on, right?
Yeah.
My contribution, how I serve, how I show up, my inner crap.
Here's a good analogy in reference to your show, is that the God flow is always there.
Yeah.
God never leaves because things are turbulent and stressful, or that's often when he's the most present, in my opinion. And a great moment of this, I remember when everything was going crazy a few years ago, and everyone was chaotic, and they didn't know what was going to happen because there's tons of uncertainty. I went for a walk in the old house we used to live in, and there's a golf course, and I walked up the hill, and everything was crazy. And I saw these 3 deers that were sitting on the fairway. And these deers, I mean, they were so chill. It looked like they just smoked a blunt, and they were all high. They were straight chilling on the grass, just like having a good time. I'm like, oh yeah, like, all of us humans are stressing over this stuff, and these animals are just like, what's up? They're just having a good time.
Yeah.
It reminds me, like, nature gets into flow every day. Animals get into flow every day.
Yeah, absolutely. think that feels like a really good place to leave it, because we'll just keep as much as I would love to, but we will just keep talking. And I know you have things to get on with your day. So thank you so much. I will leave all your details in the comments. I'm going to hit stop the record button, and we will continue this conversation another time. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joanna.
Appreciate it. Cheers. All right. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this incredible episode. I know it was a long one, but so worth it, with Ryan and his beautiful wisdom and everything he has to offer the world. So thank you so much. As promised, I'll put some links and information on how to find Ryan in the show notes. And we just really appreciate any likes, shares, reviews. Again, as a new podcast, it makes such a massive difference to us. So really appreciate it. Thank you, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now.